The hospital waiting room smelled like disinfectant and desperation. I sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair, watching my mother-in-law Eleanor clutch her designer purse with hands that shook. The first time I'd ever seen her show vulnerability in 15 years. "Thank you for coming, Victoria," she whispered, her voice lacking its usual venom. "I know I haven't always been kind. Haven't always been kind." That was like saying the Titanic had a minor leak. "My name is Victoria Chen, and I'm 35 years old. I was adopted from China when I was 2 years old by the most loving parents imaginable. The Hendersons raised me in small-town Iowa, teaching me that family was about love, not blood. I believed that until I married into the Whitmore family and learned that some people had very different definitions. I met Jonathan Whitmore in law school. He was brilliant, funny, and refreshingly down-to-earth despite coming from old Philadelphia money. His mother Eleanor, however, was carved from a different stone, cold marble, that had been polished by generations of privilege and prejudice. Our first meeting set the tone for everything that followed. Jonathan had brought me to their estate for Thanksgiving, proudly introducing me as his girlfriend. Eleanor had taken one look at me and asked, "Where is your real family from?" "Iowa," I'd answered, knowing exactly what she meant but refusing to play along. "No, dear. Your real family. Before the Hendersons." "The Hendersons are my real family," I'd said firmly. She'd smiled that razor-thin smile I'd come to know so well. "Of course. How modern." From that day forward, I was never quite family to Eleanor Whitmore. Oh, she was subtle about it. She had to be, with Jonathan watching. But the exclusions were constant and deliberate. "Family photos at Christmas? Oh, Victoria, would you mind taking this one? We want just the Whitmores. Easter brunch? It's a small gathering, just blood family. The family reunion? You understand, dear. These traditions go back generations." The worst part was how she'd say it all with that practiced smile, as if she were doing me a favor by explaining why I didn't belong. "Real family doesn't need adoption papers," became her favorite phrase, usually delivered just loud enough for others to hear, but quiet enough to maintain plausible deniability. Jonathan tried to stand up to her at first. We'd have fights about it, him apologizing for his mother, me trying to explain that apologies without change meant nothing. But Eleanor was clever. She never did anything overtly cruel when he was watching. The real cuts came when we were alone. "You know," she told me once while we were preparing Thanksgiving dinner, "Jonathan's ex-fiancée Margaret is coming to the charity gala next week. Such a lovely girl. From the Ashford Margarets, they came over on the Mayflower. Real American stock. Or my personal favorite, delivered at my own wedding reception. Don't worry about children, dear. If you can't have them naturally, Jonathan can always find someone who can. The Whitmore line must continue, after all." The implication was clear. I was temporary, replaceable, not quite real. For 15 years, I endured it. I built my career as a transplant surgeon, saved lives, published research papers, won awards. None of it mattered to Eleanor. I could have cured cancer, and she still would have introduced me as Jonathan's wife, Victoria. She's adopted, you know. Jonathan and I had 3 beautiful children, Emma, James, and little Lily. Eleanor doted on them, of course. They were real Whitmores. But even then, she found ways to exclude me. She'd take grandmother and grandchildren photos without me. She'd plan family vacations and somehow forget to invite me until Jonathan noticed. She taught my children about their Whitmore heritage, while pointedly ignoring their Chinese heritage or their Henderson grandparents. "Why doesn't grandmother Eleanor like you?" Emma asked me once when she was 7, after Eleanor had requested another, just the Whitmore grandchildren photo. "Sometimes people have small hearts," I'd told her. "But we love them anyway." The extended family followed Eleanor's lead. I was tolerated at gatherings, seated at the edges, left out of conversations about family history or traditions. Jonathan's siblings were polite but distant. His cousins barely acknowledged me. After all, I wasn't real family. I threw myself into my work. At the hospital, I was Dr. Chen, respected surgeon and transplant specialist. I saved lives, mentored residents, pioneered new techniques. My patients didn't care that I was adopted. Their families didn't question whether I was real, enough to save their loved ones. Then, 6 months ago, Eleanor got sick. It started with fatigue she couldn't shake, then swelling in her legs. The mighty Eleanor Whitmore, who had never shown weakness in her 70 years, suddenly couldn't make it through her beloved charity luncheons. The diagnosis was polycystic kidney disease, genetic, aggressive, and rapidly progressing to failure. Suddenly, the woman who had excluded me from everything was in my territory. The hospital where I worked was the best transplant center in the region. Her nephrologist was my colleague. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony. Jonathan called me from her bedside. Mom needs a kidney transplant. The disease is genetic. None of us can donate. They're putting her on the list, but the list was long. And Eleanor, despite her money and connections, would have to wait like everyone else. Unless they found a living donor. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, I didn't wish suffering on anyone. What followed was darkly amusing. The Whitmore family, who had spent 15 years emphasizing blood and genetics and real family, suddenly discovered that their precious bloodline was working against them. The same genes that made them real Whitmores also made them incompatible donors. They tested everyone. Jonathan's siblings, cousins, even distant relatives were called in. The Whitmore family tree was thoroughly shaken, but no matching kidneys fell out. Eleanor's condition worsened. Dialysis was keeping her alive, but barely. She needed a transplant soon. That's when someone remembered that I wasn't genetically related to the Whitmores. The call came from Jonathan's sister Patricia, who had spoken maybe 50 words to me in 15 years. Victoria, I know this is awkward, but we were wondering, would you consider being tested as a potential donor for Eleanor? I clarified, making sure I understood correctly. Yes, I know she hasn't always been welcoming, but she's family. Family. The word hung between us like a challenge. I'll think about it, I said. The next few days were a parade of Whitmores suddenly remembering I existed. Cousins who hadn't acknowledged me in years called to tell me what a wonderful person I was. Aunts who had excluded me from family recipes shared stories about Eleanor's kindness. Jonathan's brother, who had once joked about me being a mail-order bride, sent flowers to my office. Eleanor herself remained silent. Pride, even in the face of death, was the Whitmore way. I got tested. Not because of the phone calls or flowers, but because I was a doctor. I'd taken an oath to do no harm, to help when I could. Personal feelings didn't override professional ethics. The results came back. I was a perfect match. Dr. Morrison, the head of transplant, called me into his office. Victoria, I have to ask, are you sure about this? The surgery has risks. And given your complicated relationship with the recipient. I know, I said. I need time to think. That night, I sat with my children and tried to explain the situation in terms they could understand. Emma, now 16 and wise beyond her years, cut straight to the heart of it. Grandmother Eleanor has never been nice to you, she said. Why would you save her? Because being family isn't about blood or adoption papers or who's nice to whom, I said. It's about choosing to love, even when it's hard. But she never chose you, James pointed out, his 13-year-old sense of justice offended on my behalf. No, I agreed. She didn't. But I get to choose who I am. The next morning, I went to Eleanor's hospital room. She was alone, which was rare. The Whitmore court usually attended her constantly. She looked small in the hospital bed, her skin gray, her perfectly styled hair now limp and thin. I know why you're here, she said without preamble. Patricia told me you're a match. Yes. I won't beg, she said, chin raised despite the oxygen tubes. I've never begged for anything in my life. I'm not asking you to beg, I said, sitting in the visitor's chair. But I do have a condition. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Even dying, Eleanor Whitmore didn't like conditions from people she considered beneath her. Go on, she said. I want you to acknowledge me as family. Real family. Not just now when you need my kidney, but always. I want to be in the family photos. I want my children to know their full heritage, Whitmore, Henderson, and Chen. I want you to stop treating me like an interloper in my own life. That's blackmail, she whispered. No, I corrected. That's a boundary. I'm offering you an organ from my body, Eleanor. The least you can do is offer me basic respect in return. And if I refuse? I stood up. Then you'll wait on the transplant list like everyone else. And maybe you'll get lucky. Or maybe you'll discover that all the blue blood in the world can't save you when your kidneys fail. I left her to think about it. Jonathan was upset when he heard about my condition, but I held firm. For 15 years, I've accepted being treated as less than. I won't teach our children that's acceptable. Either I'm family or I'm not. Eleanor gets to choose. It took her 3 days. 3 days of dialysis, of weakness, of facing her own mortality. Then she called me to her room. This time, Jonathan was there, along with Patricia and their brother Charles. I agree to your terms, Eleanor said stiffly. You'll be acknowledged as family. Real family, I emphasized. No qualifiers. No adopted disclaimers. No exclusions. She winced but nodded. Real family. And you'll tell everyone exactly why, I added. You'll tell them that for 15 years, you excluded me because of prejudice and small-mindedness. You'll tell them that when you needed a kidney, the only match was the daughter-in-law you'd rejected. And you'll tell them that I'm saving your life not because of obligation, but because that's what real family does. Her face flushed, but she was trapped. Pride was nothing compared to death. Yes. Then we have a deal, I said. The surgery was scheduled for the following month. True to her word, Eleanor sent out a family email that must have killed her to write. She admitted her treatment of me, acknowledged her prejudice, and declared that I had always been real family. She had just been too blind to see it. The Whitmore family was shocked. Some were apologetic, others defensive. But the message was clear. Victoria Chen was family, full stop. The surgery went perfectly. My kidney took up residence in Eleanor's body and immediately began working. The metaphor was almost too perfect. A piece of the adopted Chinese daughter-in-law, now literally keeping the Whitmore matriarch alive. Recovery was hard for both of us. But something had shifted in Eleanor. Maybe it was facing death. Maybe it was carrying a piece of me inside her. Maybe it was simply realizing that her precious bloodline had failed her while the outsider had saved her. Thank you, she said during one of my visits to her room. Not just for the kidney. For the lesson. What lesson? That real family doesn't need adoption papers, she said, managing a small smile. But sometimes they need adoption kidneys. It's been 6 months since the transplant. Eleanor is healthy, taking her anti-rejection medications religiously. She insists I sit next to her in family photos now. She tells everyone about her brilliant daughter-in-law, the surgeon. She even asked about my parents, my real parents, the Hendersons, and invited them to Thanksgiving. The irony isn't lost on anyone. Eleanor Whitmore, champion of blood relations and genetic superiority, is only alive because of the woman she'd rejected for not being real family. Every breath she takes is courtesy of the adopted daughter-in-law she'd excluded for 15 years. At the last family gathering, Eleanor raised a toast. To Victoria, she said, who taught me that family isn't about blood or birth or tradition. It's about choice. And who chose to save me when I least deserved it. To family, I replied, raising my own glass. All of us. My children beamed. Jonathan squeezed my hand. And Eleanor Whitmore, keeper of bloodlines and tradition, smiled at her Chinese daughter-in-law with genuine warmth. It only cost her a kidney to learn what I'd known all along. Real family is about love, not blood. And sometimes the people who save us are the very ones we pushed away. The hospital bill for the transplant was covered by insurance. But the real cost? That was 15 years of prejudice, paid back with one perfectly matched kidney and a lifetime lesson in what family really means. Worth every minute in surgery, if you ask me.